The night the marsh went quiet, I knew my daughter had decided to make me the villain. You don't grow up on the Georgia coast without learning how sound tells the truth. Crickets ragging, frogs preaching, boats grumbling home. But that night, as I stood in my mother's kitchen, rinsing chamomile from a chipped porcelain mug, even the air pulled back like it didn't want to be caught near what came next. My daughter, Lena, had left her perfume in the hall, something sweet and clever that made simple things feel expensive. She'd kissed my cheek and said, "I'll swing by Nana's early to help with meds," and in that sentence were two facts and one arrangement. Yes, she would be early. Yes, there were pills. No, I wouldn't be there to watch. On the stove, a pot of grits cooled, the spoon handled warm against my palm. A storm hung offshore, the house smelled like rain and mothballs, and the faint lavender my mother, Ruth, dabbed on her wrists when she wanted to remember being young. She slept in the back bedroom, breath thin, mouth open like she'd been startled by her own stubborn heart. 91. She had outlived two husbands, one hurricane, and the original shingles on this roof. When my phone buzzed, I dried my hands and looked. Bank alert, new payee added, River and Rye, LLC. I hadn't added anyone. I hadn't hired a lawyer. I wasn't the one who needed one. Not yet. Then came the smell, metallic like pennies and teeth, drifting from the bathroom where the new do-it-all pill organizer hummed with good intentions. Lena had suggested it, Lena had set it up, Lena had insisted on the subscription service that shipped pre-sorted blisters in neat strips labeled with my mother's name, birth date, and a barcode that made control look clean. I told myself the humming was healthy, I told myself Lena was dutiful, I told myself that a granddaughter volunteering to handle medication was a blessing I'd earned. I walked to the hallway and touched the organizer. The plastic vibrated, a faint, loyal buzz. On the little screen, Tuesday, p.m., dispensed. I hadn't dispensed it. I had been here, stirring grits, answering a donor email from the shelter where I work, listening to the storm make decisions. On the counter lay a folded paper I didn't recognize. Durable power of attorney for healthcare. My mother's name, my mother's looping capital R like a sail in wind. Witness lines, notarized. The agent, Elena Quinn, my daughter. A date from last week. Fine print that turned love into authority. I felt the house tilt. Only one question had shape. Who benefits if I look unfit? I thumbed the phone open to text Lena. Instead, another alert arrived. Home safe camera, new motion detected, back bedroom. The camera was Lena's idea too, for peace of mind, Mom, and now it blinked like a red eye I had asked into my life. I walked toward the bedroom, every board underfoot remembering the weight of our family. "Mama?" I whispered, and the marsh answered with thunder that didn't travel. That was the moment everything changed. I am Mara Quinn, 52, widow, Director of Development at the South Shore Refuge, which smells like coffee grounds and clean blankets and the oniony kale of last night's soup. My job is to ask strangers to give us money so others can sleep indoors. I like numbers that turn into beds and names that turn into volunteers. I don't like asking, but I like what asking does. Savannah raised me on humidity and stories. My mother, Ruth, ran a hardware store for 40 years and kept accounts on paper because ink forced honesty. She liked to say, "If you pay today, tomorrow will respect you." My father died in a boat accident when I was 9. After that, the house grew a different kind of quiet, one that earned its keep. I married Jonah at 23, patient, broad-shouldered, skilled with engines and apologies. He taught me how to fix the freezer door with a butter knife and to leave parties when my laughs started to sound like I was working. He died at 47, of a heart that pretended to be strong until it didn't. When the casserole pans returned to their owners and the sympathy cards became coasters, it was just me and Lena and the house that had learned our footsteps. Lena came into the world like she'd been here before, eyes alert, fingers impatient, appetite for attention and pie charts. At 8, she made chore schedules. At 12, she set reminders for my mammograms. At 15, she convinced Ruth to set up online banking. She got into the University of Georgia, studied marketing, moved to Atlanta, and traded church fans for air-conditioned gyms. She bought a blazer you could see yourself in and started talking about legacy, the way the kinds of people I ask for money talk when they want to sound generous about themselves. When Ruth began to fade, this spring, slowly at first, forgetting the names of neighbors, misplacing the sugar, Lena started coming down weekends. She booked the pill service, she installed cameras, one in the hallway, one in the kitchen, one above the back door. She said, "You can check them from the app. It's the grown-up version of Little House on the Prairie, neighbors watching out for." I didn't argue for two reasons. One, Ruth liked the idea of being observed by love. Two, Lena's certainty felt like rest. By July, the heat made everything louder, including how much money we didn't talk about. My grandmother had been careful. There was property, a waterfront parcel near Tybee, willed to Ruth. There were savings from the store, modest but solid. There was an irrevocable trust set up after my father died, with a clause that read like a dare. Upon Ruth's death, assets shall pass to Mara, unless Mara is deemed unfit to serve as executor or is under investigation for elder abuse or financial mismanagement, in which case the successor beneficiary shall be Elena Quinn. A lawyer, Baines, old as salt, had insisted on the clause after a cousin siphoned his aunt's Social Security with a borrowed card. He called it future-proofing. I called it temptation on a page. 2 months ago, I noticed 3 test transfers from Ruth's checking, tiny, like someone poking a fence. $3.12, $1.97, 88 cents, to River and Rye Legal LLC, which a quick search told me was a boutique estate firm in Atlanta, specializing in wealth continuity, the kind of place where leather and low voices make fees feel like membership dues. Lena worked in a building down the street. I asked her, "You know anything about these?" She blinked, smiled. "That's you, Mom. I called on your behalf. You seemed overwhelmed." "You don't call lawyers on my behalf." "Someone has to keep this from becoming a mess," she said, brushing my shoulder like an eraser clearing chalk. "I'm protecting Nana's legacy from your generosity." She meant the shelter. She meant the way I sign checks for socks and hot plates and pretend the balance replenishes itself with faith. She didn't trust me to hold on to money that could grow. I stood in Ruth's kitchen with the fan chopping air and the linoleum warm under my feet and believed 2 things at once: that my daughter loved us, that she had started treating love like a portfolio. I told her, "Stop, step back." Lena kissed my cheek and said, "You'll thank me when there's a plan." When I went to Baines, he wore the same tweed and smelled like pipe smoke and neat grief. He showed me the clause again, ran his finger under the words that could move wealth from me to Lena if I could be made to look like unfit. "People don't usually use this," he said, "but Mara, it exists." "I'm fit," I said, which sounded like I was trying to prove I could jog. He said, "I know. Prove it when she makes you." I left with a folder and a stomach that had learned new knots. So when the bank alert pinged and the pill machine claimed it had fed Ruth without me, I thought about clauses and cameras and a granddaughter who had renamed ambition care. The marsh held its breath. Somewhere in the dark, a heron rearranged one leg. I didn't know it was the last time the house felt like it belonged to us. When I stepped into the back bedroom, the air was cooler. The old AC coughed and decided to be a hero for 1 more hour. Ruth lay half-turned, mouth open, breaths shallow, skin the pale of paper that's been folded and unfolded for years. On the nightstand, the pill strip for Tuesday p.m., neatly torn. Next to it, the Eversure bottle for blood pressure, cap askew. I whispered, "Mama," like the word could call the tide. She startled awake, blinked, smiled with only one side of her face. "Mara," she said, the R soft. "I had the most peculiar dream. Your father was fixing the outboard, said we'd be late less we left now." "There's no boat tonight," I said, squeezing her hand. It was warm, dry, the skin too thin for age to be kind. Behind me, the hallway camera's red light brightened as if it had something to say. On my phone, the HomeSafe app pinged. "Medication compliance. Hi." A congratulatory confetti animation spilled across the screen. I felt the greasy skin of panic. Something was deciding for me and celebrating itself. I swiped to bank. The new payee, River and Rye, sat there like a guest who had hung up her coat. I opened the transfer log. A pending debit. $2,500 retainer, scheduled for 7 a.m. I called Lena. She answered on the first ring, voice bright. "Hey, Mom." I asked, "You at the house earlier?" A half second too long before. "I swung by after work. Why?" "You dispensed Nana's meds?" "I helped," she said. "You forget sometimes. It's not a crime." Behind her words, I could hear traffic and rain and the human theater of a bar. I pictured her in the kind of restaurant where waiters kneel to take drink orders, where ice clinks like an education. "You added a legal payee to Mom's account?" I said. "On your say-so," she said. "You asked me to research." I didn't. "Well," she said, a sigh disguised as a laugh, "you don't always remember what you ask, do you?" The sentence landed like a seed in the dark, already sprouting. If someone later asked, "Does your mother forget?" she would have an answer that sounded patient. "Lena," I said. My voice had the quiet of a woman who has finally found the edge of a cliff. "Don't do anything without me. Nothing." "Mom," she said, softer now, "this is hard. You're tired. Let me carry some of it." "Then, I love you." Then the line went small and calm. I hung up and inhaled the room. Lavender and old cotton, and a sweetness that wasn't ours. On the nightstand, tucked under a coaster, a business card. River and Rye Legal, estate guidance for families. Handwritten on the back, ask about successor provision. The ink was the same brand as the pen Lena likes, sleek cartridge that clicks like a promise. A floorboard sounded in the hall. The house wasn't haunted. It was surveilled. I turned to the hallway camera and lifted it off its mount. The cord tugged like a leash. I pulled gently until it came free. A blue light blinked. My phone chimed. "Home safe, device offline." 30 seconds later, another chime. "Device online." It had a battery. It had a boss. I drove to the pharmacy in a rain that pinpricked the windshield and asked the night pharmacist, a woman with a braid that meant business, to print Ruth's fill history. She did, perfumed with printer heat. The list showed an extra call-in for alprazolam, a new anti-anxiety, approved by Dr. J.C. Pruitt. I knew Dr. Pruitt. He didn't add meds without a consult. The timestamp? That afternoon. "Can you show who authorized?" I asked. She pointed to the system. "Care agent." The name in the box? Elena Quinn. I stood there with the rain drying on my shirt and a strip of paper warming my fingers and decided that ignorance had finished the job I hired it for. I went home, opened Ruth's pill organizer, and counted. 4 missing from a blister that should have been whole. Alprazolam. Enough to make a person sleep through a hurricane. Enough to slow a heart that already read bedtime stories to itself. I called Pruitt's answering service. He called back with sleep in his voice and suspicion in his yes. "I never added that," he said. "Your daughter had a letter with your mother's signature. Power of attorney. Looked clean." "It is clean. That's the problem." He grunted like a man finding rot under a fresh board. "I'll flag it. You need to keep those pills out of her mouth tonight. And Mara." "What?" "Start a notebook.
Time, date, what happened. Truth gets heavy without paper. I wrote the first entry at 12:41 a.m., lightning turning the window into a mirror. Then I lay on the rug beside my mother's bed and watched her breathe, counting each rise like a vote. I told myself it was nothing. I was wrong.
The next week became a string of small alarms. Mail that didn't arrive, calls I didn't make, things I'm sure I put down that moved themselves 2 inches to the right. On Wednesday, the city inspector came to the door in a raincoat that had known better days. He held a clipboard like a priest holds a Bible. "We've had a complaint," he said. "Possible neglect. Someone reported the back porch railing is unsafe, the pantry has expired food, and the resident has bruises." "The railing's been loose since '98, I said. "I know how to step around it." "The pantry held canned peaches older than some marriages. We kept them for storms." Ruth's arms bruised if you looked at them sentimental. Still, the words possible neglect hung between us, wet and official. He walked through the house making notes. He smelled like coffee and compromise. At the bedside, he spoke to Ruth in that careful loudness people reserve for the old and the foreign. "Ma'am, do you feel safe here?" She blinked, flexed her fingers. "My daughter cooks grits better than my mother did," she said. Then, as if remembering, "Which daughter?" That question landed in his notebook with a sound. After he left, I called Lena. She said she'd heard about the complaint through a neighbor who cares. She said, "Don't be defensive, Mom. This is about Nana." "Is it?" I asked. "Everything is," she said, which was true if everything included inheritance. Friday, I found a case number in my voicemail, Adult Protective Services, requesting a callback to clarify allegations. The woman who answered spoke in sentences that came with their own receipts. "We respond to every tip," she said. "It's probably nothing." "Who called it in?" I asked. "We don't disclose," she said, which meant the system likes neutral verbs. That evening, the lights flickered, recovered. The HomeSafe app sent a push. Power disruption, reverting to cell backup. Devices surfaced on my screen that I hadn't authorized. Backdoor contact, pill sense cloud, and Ruthwear. A wearable! I hadn't strapped any device on my mother. But there it was, pulsing a neat green OK. In the bathroom trash, under 2 tissues, I found the clamshell package. Ruthwear comfort band, fall detection, vital tracking, peace of mind. The receipt, tucked inside, said, "Paid." The card was Lena's. I went to Ruth's wrist. The band sat light and white against tissue skin, a tidy little sentinel, flashing its respectable purpose. When I tried to remove it, a chirp. Unauthorized removal attempt. Alert sent. I imagined Lena's phone lighting up 3 counties away. I imagined her frowning, then smiling, then typing. 10 minutes later, unknown. "Mom, why would you take Nana's safety band off? Do you need a rest? I can come down and take over." Every noun in that sentence did work. I wrote another entry in the notebook. 7:14 p.m. Device chirped. Text arrived. Voice steady. Hands not. I underlined not 2 times. At the shelter the next morning, the industrial coffee maker gurgled like a dragon. Tasha, our operations lead, took one look at my face and pushed a muffin across the table. She said, "Talk." She's 30, built like someone who can carry 2 mattresses at once and does not enjoy euphemisms. "My daughter is making me look incompetent," I said. The air in my throat felt tight.
If you wanted to disqualify your mother from an estate, how would you do it? Slowly and with paperwork, Tasha said. I showed her the POA scan. I showed her the pharmacy printout and the APS case number. I showed her the bank alert screenshot. I think she's building a record, one where I turn into a cautionary tale. Start building yours. Stop telling yourself this is a phase. I took her advice like oxygen. I set up a shared folder with my sister June and Macan, the one with the teacher handwriting and the patience of a saint who's rethinking sainthood. I uploaded photos of pill counts, logged when Lena visited, saved every alert. I called Baines and heard the fatigue in his kindness. He asked me to come in Monday. Bring the notebook, he said. Bring the folder. Bring a witness if you can. Sunday morning, Lena arrived with casserole and composure. She moved through the kitchen like a realtor staging a showing, wiping things that were clean, straightening things that were straight. APS came, she asked, like APS were friends she'd invited to a barbecue. Yes, I said. They did their job. I'm doing mine, she said, voice soft, knife tapping the cutting board like a metronome. Order, order, order. You look tired. So do you, I said. She smiled with her mouth and not her eyes. Ruth awoke, ate 2 bites, drifted back to sea. Lena stood over her for a beat too long, then smoothed the blanket with those pretty, decisive hands. She whispered, not to my mother, but to the air. Almost done. I couldn't tell if she meant the work or Ruth's life. That was the first time I felt truly watched.
Monday at Baines's smelled like old books and sharpened pencils. The receptionist wore a brooch shaped like a magnolia and the kind of smile people earn by choosing it on purpose. Baines examined my folder like a jeweler evaluates a ring someone swears is real. This is good, he said, tapping pill counts, timestamps, notations. Truth appreciates timestamps. I need more than appreciation, I said. He nodded toward a young associate in a navy suit with the posture of a man who has been told posture is currency. This is Eli. He handles digital evidence. He's our translator to the gods of the cloud. Eli scrolled my HomeSafe logs, the Ruthware portal, the pharmacy's portal screenshot. He whistled, soft, then lower. There's an admin account here, he said, pointing to careadmin.eq. Your daughter set up the ecosystem. She can trigger remote dispense, approve meds, see vitals, and, his eyebrows lifted, declare caregiver fatigue incidents. Meaning? Eli scrolled my HomeSafe logs, the Ruthware portal, the pharmacy's portal screenshot. He whistled, soft, then lower. There's an admin account here, he said, pointing to careadmin.eq. Your daughter set up the ecosystem. She can trigger remote dispense, approve meds, see vitals, and, his eyebrows lifted, declare caregiver fatigue incidents. Meaning? Meaning she's writing it down, I said. For the record that will outlive your mouth, Eli said. Baines rubbed his temple. We can challenge the POA as undue influence. Your mother's capacity is the hinge. If Dr. Pruitt will testify she didn't understand what she signed, we can suspend it pending review. She understands plenty, I said. She also believes in the last person who held her hand. Judges believe forms, Baines said gently. Let's give them ours. He drafted a petition to pause the POA and to appoint a neutral temporary agent. He scheduled a quick hearing. You'll need to keep your cool, he warned, as if cool were an object you can put in a purse and remember not to lose. On my way out, my phone pinged with a calendar invite. Family meeting, River and Rye, Wednesday, 10 a.m. Organizer, Ilana Quinn. Guests, Ruth, Mara, Baines. Location, Atlanta. Baines frowned. She's moving fast. My sister June met me in the parking lot with a hug that made the ground reconsider itself. I've been quiet too long, she said. Tell me what to carry. We drove home with wipers busy, marsh grass bowing. The porch light glowed the way a porch light does when it tries to look welcoming and instead looks like a witness. Inside, the hallway camera sat where I'd left it, eye-lidded, but the kitchen had a new occupant, a sealed med box with a code panel, a sticky note. For safety, Lena. June said, "That's a jail." "It's a mother-proof container," I said. The note smiled politely. I wanted to rage. I made tea instead. The kettle screamed and calmed. Ruth asked for lemon. I watched her lips close around the cup edge, thin like onion skin, and thought how easy it is to love someone into a corner if you call the corner a cradle. At 8:10 p.m., HomeSafe sent an alert. Fall detected. The Ruthware band reported a sudden vertical change. I was in the room. She hadn't fallen. I checked the band. It pulsed steady. Manual false positive appeared, then incident logged. "Who logged it?" June asked. "Admin," I said. "From where?" "From wherever she is." June looked at me with the clarity of a teacher who has had enough. "Then let's move faster." We filed our petition online that night. Eli attached logs. Baines drafted words that turned fear into paragraphs the court could file. The clerk stamped "Hearing set, Friday, 9 a.m." At 10:03 p.m., Lena texted, "This is getting messy. Don't make me choose between you and Nana's safety." The sentence folded around itself like origami, gentle, precise, beautiful, and not meant to be unfolded by anyone but its maker.
If that was true, then what else had I missed?
Tuesday, the bank manager called. "Miss Quinn, we've had unusual activity, out-of-pattern inquiries on your mother's CDs, a request to add a co-signer." "Who requested?" I asked. "Her agent," he said. "Her agent is under review," I said. He cleared his throat. "The documents appear valid." "Appearances are working overtime this month," I said. "Please freeze." He said he'd note concerns. The tone suggested concerns line up in a lobby and wait their turn. At 2:14 p.m., my phone lit with a message from APS. We'd like to schedule a home visit to observe caregiver interactions. It would be Thursday at 3. Thursday at 10, we were supposed to be at River and Rye. Friday at 9 in court. The week grew teeth. Wednesday morning, I cooked eggs that tasted like dust. June went through the house like a witness preparing for cross. Photos off the floor, rugs flat, pantry sorted. I wanted to hide the bruised peaches. I left them because truth with makeup is still truth. Lena arrived with a tote bag shaped like a decision. She took out a folder labeled Incident Log and placed it on the counter like a gift. "Just so we're on the same page," she said, voice buttered. "I've been compiling." I opened the folder. Each sheet a tidy narrative. Monday, 9:12 a.m. Mara failed to administer morning meds until reminded by app. Wednesday, 2:47 p.m. Mara agitated refinances, raised voice near Ruth. Thursday, 6:50 p.m. House clutter increases fall risk. Small checkboxes next to caregiver strain. Mild, moderate, severe. Most checked moderate. Too severe. I felt my pulse in my gums. "Who are these for?" She said, "For continuity, in case I need to step in." I said, "You've already stepped on my neck." She smiled the way people do when they are being filmed and plan to use the footage later. "Don't be dramatic. It won't look good." June took the folder, flipped pages the way a person flips a switch. "You're very thorough, Lena," she said. "You forgot to log the part where your mother hasn't slept through a night since March." Lena's eyes flicked to the hallway camera. It blinked. My body remembered the taste of pennies. "We all want the same thing," Lena said. "Do we?" I asked. The marsh wind pressed the window, listening. We drove to Atlanta Thursday morning because you can't hold a lawyer's eye over video. River and Rye looked like money respects itself. Walnut reception, water in bottles that implied a mountain origin story, a scent that made paper feel eager to be signed. The partner, Mr. Darden, met us with a tie knot that had learned discipline at a school I couldn't afford it. "We're here to ensure Mrs. Root's wishes are honored," Darden said. His file had color-coded tabs that matched his pocket square. "It appears there are complications." "Complications," I repeated, because sometimes repeating a bird helps it confess. He slid across a draft amendment, language that would appoint a professional fiduciary to manage Ruth's care and estate to avoid family distress and accelerate efficient transition upon death. In the margin, in pencil, someone had written, "Successor to Elena if Mara disqualified." I looked at Lena. She looked at Darden. "This is normal," she said. "It's not normal in this family," I said. "Families evolve," she said. I turned to Darden. "Did you meet my mother?" "Not yet," he said suavely, "but Miss Quinn has described her needs comprehensively." "She always has," I said. "You should meet the woman. She's the client." He smiled like a man educating a student he respects. "We serve the best interests." "Best interests sometimes need a voice," I said. "She still has one." We didn't sign. On the drive back, June cussed in a way that would have made our mother pretend not to hear. The sky opened briefly, then remembered itself. We pulled into the driveway at 2:58 for the APS visit. Miss Rivera, the caseworker, wore sensible shoes and a gaze that saw stains and stories and didn't confuse them. She asked Ruth questions. She watched me pour water. She asked Lena for her logs. Lena handed them over like she was giving blood for science. Miss Rivera glanced at the hallway camera and asked, "Who has access?" I said, "Care admin, EQ, and owner Mara." She scribbled. She asked to see the pill box. She scanned the barcodes with her phone. She asked if Ruth had fallen. Lena said twice. I said 0. Miss Rivera wrote discrepancy. Then Ruth, who had been drifting like a boat with the engine cut, fixed her eyes on Miss Rivera and said, clear as a bell, with good intentions, "My granddaughter loves me the way a cat loves a mouse she wants to keep alive," and then patted Lena's hand. "Don't look like that, baby. Truth is still love." We stood there and breathed, like beginners. Miss Rivera closed her notebook very gently, as if it contained a small bird. "We'll be in touch," she said. That night I couldn't swallow. The air had the taste of tin. At 11:37, home safe pinged. Back door opened. I was in bed, June on the couch, Ruth asleep. I grabbed the flashlight and moved through the house with the careful muscles of a person who has learned their creaks. The back door was closed. The sensor insisted it wasn't. Admin override applied appeared on my phone, followed by security contacted. At 11:49, a deputy knocked softly. He knew me by first name. This is a small county. He said, "We got a call. Door sensor. You okay?" I said, "Yes, we are okay." The next morning, I moved all cameras to a box in the pantry. I left the pantry door open. I wanted the red eyes to see the dark for once. And then I realized it wasn't just about me anymore. Friday morning, court smelled like floor polish and coffee that had already done its job. Our judge had a face like she'd seen too many families explain themselves and not enough choose mercy. Baines spoke first, voice low, cadence that made even adjectives trustworthy. He presented the timeline, the POA, the meds, the logs, the attempted bank changes, the legal drafts. He handed up Miss Rivera's preliminary note, monitor, possible caregiver conflict, bias present. Lena's legal wore gray and confidence. He called me emotional and erratic and said words like burnout with sympathy that sounded like strategy. He said Lena had stepped in. He called the cameras smart care. He framed the logs as responsible. He did not mention successor provisions. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Quinn," she said, "I can appoint a neutral agent today, or I can pause your daughter's authority and schedule a full hearing with testimony in 2 weeks. A neutral will make decisions in the meantime." The choice tasted like salt. A neutral meant strangers in our medicine. Pausing Lena meant 2 weeks of vigilance where every minute could become Exhibit A or B. My knees wanted to sit down and let a professional take my mother's breath in hand. But if I handed Ruth to a company, Lena would say I'd admitted unfitness. I thought of Ruth's sentence about cats and mice. I thought of Lena at 8, building chore charts with glitter pens. I thought of the marsh at night, how it only goes silent right before the wind changes. "Pause her authority," I said. "I will take the 2 weeks." The judge nodded. Done. Her gavel made a sound too small for what it meant. Once I made that choice, there was no going back.
The unraveling began with paper and ended with pixels. On Saturday, June found a draft letter on the family printer upstairs, the printer only Lena uses when she's here because she likes how the old machine smells like work. The letter was to Coastal State Bank requesting urgent review of suspicious withdrawals by Miss Mara Quinn. It listed 3 cash withdrawals in July I could prove I hadn't made because I was at the shelter during 2 and asleep during 1. Attached, security camera stills from an ATM showing a woman with my build, my posture, my raincoat. The timestamp said July 12th, 11:18 p.m. At 11:18, I had been at our kitchen table alphabetizing donor thank you letters by zip code, because alphabetizing sometimes makes grief behave. The stills resolution wasn't good enough to convict, but good enough to suggest. The raincoat looked like mine because my raincoat looks like every mother's raincoat from 2012. Navy, sensible, hood that makes you look like a cautionary tale. Eli ran the image through a tool that measures faces by math I don't trust. Not you, he said. Close. Someone who wants to be you from 30 feet and 2 pixels away. He cross-checked bank logs. The ATM camera belonged to a branch whose security vendor shares server space with HomeSafe. Same parent company, he said. They sell safety like chain restaurants sell comfort. We printed everything. The folder grew girth like a relative who eats well at holidays. My hands shook less when holding it. The second twist arrived Sunday afternoon. Miss Rivera returned with a colleague. She looked at the pantry, the pillbox, the cameras in their carton. She asked to see the HomeSafe dashboard. I opened it. The Care Admin LQ account was grayed out, access restricted by court order. But a new entry glowed. Family Monitor, authorized by Agent Substitute. Under it, River and Rye Legal Care Liaison. Someone had given the law firm a window into our house. Rivera's colleague, Mr. Hill, asked me to step outside. The porch smelled like yesterday's rain. He spoke straight. Miss Quinn, we've seen this before. Technology makes wrongdoing look responsible. We will recommend to the court that all third-party access, family, legal, corporate, be suspended until review. That includes you. Me? I asked. The word came out like a cough. To level the field, he said, not unkind. Inside, Rivera knelt by Ruth and asked questions that tasted like pudding. Up close, my mother's eyes were fierce as always. From the doorway, she looked like someone's postcard from the past. Who do you want to make decisions for you? Rivera asked. Ruth took my hand with surprising grip. She said, my daughter. Which? Rivera asked gently. The one I trained, Ruth said. Then clearer. The one who knows what enough means. She looked at me. Mara. Rivera nodded. She will note that. She closed her notebook slower this time, like a door you don't want to slam in a storm. Monday morning, Evershire called. We have a refill request flagged by our fraud team. Unusual dosage escalation for alprazolam. We denied it. Who requested? I asked. Agent on file. Elena, she said. She's paused, I said. Oh, our system hasn't received that yet. I realized then that pausing a person in a courtroom doesn't pause them in systems they've already wired. I drove to the pharmacy with the court order like a flag. They photocopied, they apologized, they put a hard stop on controlled meds. At home, a letter waited from River and Rye asserting that my emotional state had compromised my judgment and requesting amicable transition to professional oversight. It cited incidents including angry outburst at city inspector and interference with safety devices. It CC'd APS, the bank, Dr. Pruitt, and HomeSafe Corporate. It was a net. I was the fish expected to be grateful for rescue. Eli called. He said, I dug more. River and Rye runs a side consultancy,
family continuity tech that designed a template of care logs and lawyer letters to prepare for transitions. Guess who beta tested? Your daughter's account name is on the pilot list. Say it plain, I said. He said, she's not just using a system. She helped build it for this. I sat at the kitchen table and ate a saltine because chewing makes decisions steadier. Then I called Baines. I said, file for a temporary injunction against River and Rye, alleged tortious interference and misuse of medical proxies. Ask the court to order a full audit of access logs and to appoint a neutral forensics expert to image our devices. If we're going to be modern, let's be modern. Baines was quiet a beat. He said, you always did know how to spend a donation, and I heard admiration sneak into the humor. We filed. The judge set a hearing for Wednesday. Tuesday, Lena texted a photo of her at a juice bar, holding something green. I'm not your enemy, she wrote. I'm your solution. I typed no and deleted it, typed stop and deleted that. I wrote, you're my daughter. That used to be enough. I didn't send it. That night, Ruth woke at 3:11 and asked for peaches. I fed her with a spoon. She chewed slowly, hands folded, eyes on my face. Don't let them turn love into a spreadsheet, she said. Anybody can do math. I stroked her hair and promised something my mouth wasn't sure how to deliver. Thunder reached the house 4 seconds after lightning. The marsh took a breath. We were ready for the climax. We didn't know what it would cost.
Wednesday's hearing drew more suits than a wedding. River and Rye sent 2 partners and a young associate who wrote like speed had a grade. HomeSafe dialed in a compliance officer with a voice that made the word policy sound like absolution. APS sent Ms. Rivera. Baines brought Eli and a stack of exhibits that could anchor a small boat. The judge asked for brief opening remarks. Darden did elegant concern. He called me overwhelmed and called Lena responsible and called River and Rye a neutral facilitator. He said the phrase best interests so many times it lost meaning and became a shape you can't step around. Baines kept it tighter. This is a case about control wearing a stethoscope, he said. We will show an orchestrated campaign to create the appearance of unfitness using devices, logs, and lawyer letters. We will show false incident entries, attempted financial access, and unauthorized dosing. Eli explained how CareAdmin could pre-mark incidents and backfilled timestamps to match a narrative. He showed log entries with IP addresses matching Lena's phone when she claimed to be elsewhere. He showed ATM stills metadata pointing to HomeSafe's server farm, the parent company tie-in. He showed that the fall didn't happen. He showed the letter to the bank with the draft tag still in its PDF properties, created by EQ. Rivera testified about the visit, about the band, about Ruth's statement. She did not call anyone a cat. She did say, my professional concern includes the potential for manufactured caregiver risk. Then the judge asked to hear from the family. I stood. My knees did their protest. I said, I am not perfect. I've been tired and scared and sometimes loud. But I have not neglected my mother. I have not stolen from her. I have not dosed her to sleep through my fear. Lena stood after me, hair a sheet, blazer a flag. She said, I love my grandmother. I love my mother. But love doesn't fix incompetence. She looked at me, practiced regret in her eyes. I have evidence. Baines slid over our evidence. Darden objected to everything. The judge overruled most. When Eli displayed the CareAdmin dashboard with pre-logged incidents, Lena's jaw changed shapes. When he displayed the River and Rye beta document with Elena Quinn in the footer as pilot user, she made a sound like she'd swallowed a stone. Miss Quinn, did you pre-log incidents before they occurred? Lena took too long. I recorded probable events to ensure continuity of care. Did you approve controlled meds without physician instruction? I had authority. Did you attempt to alter banking arrangements? That was for protection. Of whom? Silence held court. Then Baines called the pharmacist and Dr. Pruitt. Pruitt,
unshaven and warm, like a man who left a delivery to testify, said, "I did not authorize alprazolam. The signature looks like mine generated by a system. It is not mine." The judge leaned back, hands steepled. She said, "I am granting the injunction. River and Rye is to cease all involvement. HomeSafe is to provide a full audit of access logs to the court-appointed examiner. The POA is suspended pending a competency hearing. Miss Quinn," she looked at Lena, "you are barred from unilateral medical or financial actions and from access to monitoring dashboards. Miss Mara Quinn remains primary physical caregiver until further order." In that moment, I finally understood everything. My daughter hadn't just been tempted by the clause, she had trained for it, with companies that turned family into throughput. She had convinced herself that outcomes justified methods, that a tidy legacy would compensate for messy love. The gavel sounded again. Paper collected itself into a future. Outside, the heat slapped. Through the courthouse glass, I saw Lena standing with Darden, mouth fierce, hands exact. Part of me wanted to go to her and say, "You don't have to become the sharpest version of yourself to keep us." Instead, I went to the car and held a steering wheel until my palms registered it as real.
The house resumed its sounds, crickets cocky, frogs practical, AC admitting to old age. We removed the cameras, boxed the pill machine, replaced the smart band with a simple watch. The porch railing still leaned. I nailed a brace where even my father would have approved. HomeSafe sent an email promising enhanced safeguards against misuse. River and Rye issued a statement about valuing families. The bank apologized with pastries. Miss Rivera returned with a smile that belonged to the part of her job that occasionally worked. She said, "We're closing the neglect case," she said. "We'll remain available." Ruth had more good days, in the kitchen with lemon cookies, in the sunroom telling me stories about my father's jokes, in the yard naming birds as if she had hired them. She had some bad days too. On those, she took my hand and called me Mama, and I let her, because sometimes comfort is a backward map. Lena didn't come by for a while. She sent 2 texts that said, "I'm thinking" and "I'm sorry," in that order. We had a hearing set for competency, Dr. Pruitt prepared to say. She understands, even if the details slide. I prepared to say, I do too. June went back to Macon with a cooler full of leftovers and a look that promised she'd drive at midnight if I asked. Eli mailed me a thumb drive labeled, "For the file." Baines invited me to bring Ruth to sign a limited POA naming me and June joint for medical decisions only. We did. Ruth's hand shook, but she wrote her name with flourish. Life wouldn't be the same, but it would go on. When people talk about inheritance, they mean property and coins and maybe a watch that ticks too loud. What I didn't understand until now is how much we also inherit methods. The way our people handled fear, the way they named control, the way they justified small trespasses in rooms no one else entered. I passed along caution like it was kindness. I taught my daughter to plan for emergencies, to carry copies of her insurance card, to leave early and text when she arrived. Somewhere between a grocery list and a hurricane kit, we both started believing preparation could be permission. Lena didn't wake up greedy, she woke up useful. Then she met a clause and a company that calls itself a solution, and together they gave her a route around listening. The part that hurts is how similar we are. I too like charts that make chaos sit. I too like locks when storms approach. The difference, I hope, is that I believe consent is not a luxury. Love without consent is logistics. Ruth sleeps more now. Sometimes I play her the marsh sounds on my phone when the real marsh is quiet. I don't record her, not anymore. I don't even write as much in the notebook, though it waits in the drawer like a friend who won't ask where you've been. Trust is fragile. People say that like it's a warning,
but I think it's a promise. If we handle it right, it shows us who we are when we're not busy improving each other.
She tried to turn love into paperwork, and I almost let her. I chose my mother's hand over the form, and this time the page had to follow us.